Let me tell you about David. This one still keeps me up at night. When he walked into my office that Thursday afternoon, I noticed his shoes first. They were expensive, Italian leather, the kind that costs more than most people's monthly rent, but they were scuffed, worn down at the heels, like he'd been walking in them for years without ever taking them to be polished. That was the first contradiction. I know enough about watches to recognize one worth more than a house. But he kept pulling his sleeve down to cover it, over and over. He was ashamed of it. He sat down across from me, and the first thing he said was, "Dr. Marchetti, I need you to understand something. I'm not here because I'm poor. I'm here because I'm terrified of my own money, of water, of intimacy, of success." But I had never heard anyone say they were terrified of their own money. He told me he was an accountant, a successful one. He had a corner office in one of the biggest firms in Chicago. He made $420,000 a year. He had investments, properties, a retirement fund that would make most people weep with envy. And he couldn't spend a single dollar without feeling like he was going to die. Not anxiety, not discomfort. Actual physical terror. His heart would race. His hands would shake. He would feel a crushing weight on his chest like someone was standing on him. "I've had 3 heart attacks," he told me. "All of them in stores. All of them when I was about to buy something for myself." I leaned forward. "What were you trying to buy?" He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. "A coat," he said. "Just a coat." It was winter. My old one had holes in it. I was standing at the register with my credit card in my hand, and I just ... collapsed. That's when I knew this wasn't anxiety. This wasn't a spending disorder. This was something much older, much deeper. And what we found in the regression, it explained everything, including the one detail that still haunts me. The coat he was trying to buy, it was the exact same shade of blue as something he'd worn 300 years ago, something that had gotten him killed. David Harrison was 47 years old when he first sat in my office. On paper, he was the definition of success. Partner at a major accounting firm, owner of a brownstone in Lincoln Park, worth $2.3 million. A portfolio of investments that generated passive income most people couldn't even imagine. But when I looked at him, I didn't see success. I saw exhaustion, the kind that lives in your bones, the kind that no amount of sleep can cure. "Tell me about the fear," I said. "When did it start?" He rubbed his temples. The gesture was automatic, practiced, like he'd been doing it for years. "I don't remember a time when I wasn't afraid of money," he said. "Even as a kid, my parents thought I was just frugal, responsible. They praised me for it. David never asks for anything. David saves every penny." They had no idea I was terrified. Terrified of what exactly? He looked at me, and in that moment I saw something in his eyes that I've only seen a handful of times in my career. It wasn't fear, it was certainty. The absolute, unshakable conviction that something terrible would happen. "If I spend money on myself," he said slowly, "something bad will happen. I don't know what. I don't know when, but I know it with every cell in my body." Imagiano. The specificity was important. On himself, not on others. "Can you spend money on other people?" He nodded. "That's the strange part. I've paid for my sister's kids' college. I donate to charities I bought my mother a house when she retired. Doesn't bother me at all. But the moment I try to buy something for myself, ... Dubba quits, he trailed off, his hand going to his chest. The heart attacks, I said. The first one was 12 years ago. I was 35. I'd just made partner. My colleagues took me out to celebrate, and someone suggested we go to a tailor. Get me a custom suit to mark the occasion. He paused, swallowing hard. I picked out the fabric. I stood there while they took my measurements, and when the tailor told me the price, I felt my heart stop. Literally stop. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later, and you've had 2 more since then, both in similar situations. Once when I tried to buy a car, once with the coat. He shook his head. My cardiologist says there's nothing wrong with my heart. No blockages, no... He says there are panic attacks that mimic cardiac events, but they don't feel like panic attacks, doctor. They feel like punishment. That word hung in the air between us. Punishment. Tell me about your childhood, I said. Your family's relationship with money. He leaned back for the first time. Some of the tension left his shoulders. We were comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. My father was an engineer. My mother taught elementary school. They weren't extravagant, but they weren't penny pinchers either. Normal, I guess. Any trauma related to money, job loss, financial crisis? No! My childhood doesn't make sense. Boring. In a good way. Nothing happened. There's no logical reason for me to feel this way. I noted that too. No childhood trauma, no learned behavior, no environmental cause. What about your dreams? I asked. He went pale. Actually, Polly, the color drained from his face like water from a sink. How did you know about the dreams? I didn't. But your reaction tells me they're significant. He was quiet for a long moment. When G spoke, his voice had changed. Younger somehow. Smaller. I dream about coins, he said. Gold coins. Piles and piles of them. And in the dream, I'm counting them over and over. My fingers are bleeding from handling them, but I can't stop counting. And there's someone standing behind me, watching. I can feel their eyes on my back. And I know, in the dream, I know that when I'm done counting, when I reach the last coin, something terrible is going to happen. Do you ever reach the last coin? Never. I always wake up before I do. Heart pounding. He paused. I've had that dream since I was 6 years old. 6 years old. Long before any conscious understanding of money. Long before any possible financial trauma in this life. There's something else, he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. What is it? My wife left me 3 years ago. We'd been married for 15 years. She said she couldn't take it anymore. Living in a house I refused to furnish properly. Driving a car with 200,000 miles on it because I couldn't bring myself to buy a new one. Wearing clothes until they fell apart. His voice cracked. She said it wasn't the money. It was watching me torture myself. She said I was punishing myself for something and she couldn't figure out what. Were you punishing yourself? He looked at me with those exhausted eyes. I don't know, doctor. That's why I'm here. Because everyone keeps telling me I'm punishing myself, but I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know what I'm being punished for. And I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being afraid of my own success. In the weeks that followed, I learned more about David's patterns. He lived in a 4-bedroom brownstone but slept on a mattress on the floor. He'd never bought a bed frame. Couldn't bring himself to do it. He drove a 1998 Honda Civic with 312,000 miles on it. He'd taken it to the mechanics so many times they knew him by name. "Just patch it up," he'd say. "Make it last a little longer." His refrigerator was usually empty except for the basics: bread, butter, eggs. Not because he couldn't afford food, but because buying groceries for himself felt like an indulgence he didn't deserve. His co-workers thought he was eccentric. "David's just quirky," they'd say. They had no idea he went home to an empty house every night, ate toast for dinner, and cried himself to sleep because he didn't understand why he was living this way. He'd been to therapists before, dozens of them: cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, medication. Nothing worked. The fear was too deep, too primal. It didn't respond to logic because it didn't come from logic. It came from somewhere else entirely. During our 5th session, David told me about his grandmother. She was Chet, he said, came to America in 1948, escaped the communists with nothing but the clothes on her back. He smiled sadly. She used to tell me stories about the old country, about her family. They were merchants, successful ones, until everything fell apart. What happened? She never said exactly. Just that they lost everything, and that the loss changed them. She'd get this look in her eyes when she talked about it, like she was seeing something I couldn't see. Did she have a similar relationship with money? The opposite. She spent freely, generously, almost recklessly. She said she'd learned that you can't take it with you, so you might as well enjoy it while you can. He paused, but sometimes, when she looked at me, she'd get this strange expression, like she was worried about something. Did she ever tell you what worried her? Once, I was about 10 years old. We were at her house for Thanksgiving, and I'd refused to eat the turkey because I didn't want to use up my plate. I was eating bread, saving the turkey for everyone else. She took me aside and said, "Dot, dot, dot, dot." Double quotes his voice caught. She said, "You carry an old weight, David. A weight that isn't yours. And someday you'll have to put it down." An old weight. I never knew what she meant. She died when I was 12. He looked at his hands. But I think about those words all the time, especially when I can't breathe in the checkout line, especially when I'm counting money in my dreams. I knew then that we needed to go deeper, that whatever was holding David captive wasn't in this lifetime. It was somewhere else, someone else, and I had a feeling his grandmother knew more than she'd ever told him. It took 3 more sessions before David agreed to try regression. "I'm a numbers man," he told me. "I don't believe in past lives. I don't believe in karma. I believe in data and evidence." "I understand," I said, "but we've tried evidence-based approaches. They haven't worked. Whatever is causing this fear is beyond the reach of conventional therapy. Because it's irrational. Because it existed before your rational mind did. Before this life did, perhaps." He was quiet for a long time. "The dreams," he finally said. "The gold coins. The counting. That's not rational. It feels more real than my waking life sometimes." "It's real." He took a breath. "Okay, let's try." I guided him into a relaxed state, watching his breathing slow, his shoulders drop, his face soften. He was a good subject. The analytical mind, once it surrenders control, often goes deep quickly. "I want you to follow the feeling," I said. "The fear of spending money on yourself. Follow it backward. Let it show you where it began. His eyelids flickered. "It's cold," he murmured. "Very cold. There are candles, but they don't give much light. Where are you?" "A room. Stone walls. I'm sitting at a table. There are ledgers in front of me. Numbers. So many numbers." His breathing quickened. "And coins. Piles of coins. I'm counting them." The dream. We were already in the space of his recurring dream. "Who are you?" He was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Older, more formal, with a trace of Johannes Merkel. I couldn't quite. "I am a merchant. My name, a moneylender, is Johannes." He paused. "The year is 1623. This is Prague." Prague? His grandmother was Czech. The threads were already connecting. "Tell me about your life, Johannes." "I am successful." "Very successful. I lend money to the nobility, to the church, to anyone who needs it." His face darkened. "They need me. But they hate me. They always hate the ones who hold their debts. Because Why do they hate what you? They want. Because every time they see me, they're reminded that they owe me something." His hands clenched. "But I am careful. I follow the rules. I pay my taxes. I give to charity. I never overcharge. I am fair. I am always fair. And yet, the hatred grows. Every year, every month. The whispers get louder. The Jewish moneylender is getting too rich. The Jewish moneylender is buying too much property." The Jewish moneylender. I could hear the fear in his voice now. Not David's modern fear. Something older. Something that had been waiting 300 years to be spoken. "Tell me what happens." His face contorted. "There is a man, a nobleman, Lorgi Achnofi von Sternberg. He owes me 3,000 gold florins. A fortune. He borrowed it to pay his gambling debts. Now the debt is due, and he cannot pay. What does he do? I cannot give more. He begs me for more time. My own creditors are waiting. My family depends on this money. Extension." His voice hardened. I tell him no. I tell him he must pay, or I will go to the courts. How does he respond? He leaves. Quietly. Too quietly. I should have known. I should have seen it in his eyes. But I was counting. Always counting. Making sure the numbers balanced. Making sure everything was accounted for. He was trembling now. Whatever was coming, his body remembered it, even if his conscious mind didn't. What happens next, Johannes? 3 days later, it is night. I am in my counting room, as always. The candles are burning low. I should go to bed, but I cannot sleep until I've finished the ledger. He stopped. His breathing was rapid now. Shallow. Go on. There is a sound at the door, and then they are inside. Men in black cloaks. 5 of them, maybe 6. They have torches. They have weapons. What do they want? And leading them, they say, I have cheated them. His voice broke. From them. Leading them is that Lord my wealth Sternberg, that I have been practicing usury and witchcraft, that I have cursed good Christian families with my Jewish money magic. Tears were streaming down his face now. David's face, but also Johannes' face, separated by 400 years, but united in terror. It is lies, all lies. But it does not matter. They do not want truth. They want my gold. What do they do to you? They want my house. They beat me. They make me watch as they tear apart my counting room. They find my gold, all of it. Everything I have saved. Everything I have earned through decades of honest work. His voice dropped to a whisper, and then Lord von Sternberg picks up a bag of coins, my coins, and he throws them at my feet. "Count them," he says. "Count them, Jew, one last time, and do you. I have no choice. I count my knees. Every coin, blood because in my eyes. It is all I know how to do. Because in that moment, the numbers are the only thing keeping me alive. What happens when you finish counting?" He went silent, completely silent, his whole body rigid. "What happens when you finish counting?" He kills me. The words were barely audible. When I reach the last coin, when I say the number out loud, he drives his sword through my back, and the last thing I see is my gold coins scattered across the floor, covered in my blood. He was sobbing now, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient. And my last thought before everything goes dark is that if I hadn't counted so well, if I hadn't been so good with money, if I hadn't been so successful, they would have left me alone. I would have lived. There it was, the root, the seed planted 400 years ago that had grown into David's terror. Success with money equals death. Counting equals death. Having more than others equals death. Every time David tried to spend money on himself, every time he tried to enjoy his success, some deep part of him believed he was counting that last coin, signing his own death warrant. But we weren't done yet. There was more. "Johannes," I said gently, "is there anything else? Anything that happened after?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then my wife, my children, they were in the house. His voice was hollow now, empty. They heard everything. They heard me counting. They heard me die. And after after the men left with my gold, my wife found my body. She held me. She was covered in my blood, and she cursed me. "Cursed you. We could have been happy," she said. "We could have been safe. Johannes, you had if you had only spent counting. If you had to keep let us saving, enjoy it. And now it has killed you, and it will kill all of us. What happened to your family? Without my protection, without my money, they had nothing. They were expelled from Prague within the week. My wife died on the road. My children, I do not know what happened to my children. His curse had become prophecy. His fear of spending had led to his death. And his wife's last words, spoken in grief and rage, had echoed through the centuries. If you had only spent it, if you had only let us enjoy it. There's something else, he whispered. Something I see now that I couldn't see before. What is it? My wife. I recognize her. His eyes opened, though he was still deep in the regression state. In this life, I know her in this life. Who is she? My grandmother, my Czech grandmother who escaped who told me I carried an old weight. His voice was filled with wonder. She came back. She found me, and she spent her whole life trying to show me a different way, trying to break the pattern. His grandmother, who had learned somewhere between 1623 and 1948 that holding on to money could kill you, who had come back as a woman who spent freely, generously, trying to model a different relationship with wealth, who had looked at her grandson with worry because she recognized something old in him, something she thought she'd left behind in Prague. I brought David out of the regression slowly. He was disoriented at first, as they often are. The senses don't disentangle is. When he was fully present, he looked at me with new eyes. I wasn't punishing myself, he said. I was trying to protect myself. Some part of me believed that if I stayed small, if I stayed poor, if I never counted that last coin, they couldn't kill me again. Yes, but I've been killing myself anyway. Every day, by refusing to live. He was quiet for a long time, processing, integrating. My grandmother knew, he finally said. She knew, but she couldn't tell me. How do you tell a child that they're carrying the trauma of a past life, that the weight on their shoulders is 400 years old? She did what she could, I said. She showed you a different way. Spend it, planted, enjoy it. You can't take it with you. He laughed, but there were tears in his eyes. She was trying to rewrite the curse her past self had spoken. She was trying to save me. 3 weeks after the regression, David came back to my office. He looked different. The exhauster was still there, but there was something else now. A lightness. I bought a bed, he said. A real bed. King-sized memory foam, the whole thing. He shook his head. I had a panic attack in the store, but I stayed. I breathed through it. And when they delivered it, when I slept on it, that first night. ... Double quotes, he paused. I didn't dream about coins. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't dream about coins. What did you dream about instead? My grandmother. She was young, the way she must have looked before I was born. She was standing in a garden full of flowers, and she was laughing. And she said to me, "You finally put it down. Dee, wait. You finally let it go. I'm buying a new car next week, and I'm going to fill my refrigerator. And I'm going to live in my house instead of just existing in it." He looked at me. Johannes died counting coins, but David is going to live spending them on himself, on others, on whatever brings joy. He stood to leave, then turned back. There's one more thing. After the regression, I started researching. I found records, old records from Prague. There was a merchant named Johannes Merkel who was murdered in 1623. His estate was seized. His family was expelled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, an old document, clearly a copy of something much older. Look at the amount that was seized from his estate. I looked. The number was written in elaborate old script. 420,000 gold, FLORINS.420,000. The exact amount David earned per year, too. I felt a chill run down my spine. In 26 years, I've learned not to be surprised by these coincidences, but this one was different. This one had numbers, and numbers don't lie. There's more, David said. His voice was trembling now, but not from fear, from something else. Wonder, perhaps, or recognition. I kept digging. I found the name of the nobleman who killed him, Largiarnofi von Sternberg, and I found what happened to him failed. After what happened, investment he went bankrupt. By 1626, he was living in a single room, begging for scraps from the same people he used to command. David paused. The records say he died alone, penniless, counting his last few coins over and over, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. The symmetry was almost unbearable. The man who had forced Johannes to count coins before killing him had spent his final days doing the same thing. Karma, it seems, has a very specific sense of irony. But that's not what keeps me up at night, David continued. What keeps me up is what I found about Johannes' children. You said you didn't know what happened to them. I didn't. Until last week. He pulled out another document. This one was newer, a family tree meticulously researched. Johannes had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The son died young, somewhere on the road out of Prague, but their daughter survived. She made it to Vienna. She married. She had children of her own. He pointed to a name at the bottom of the tree. Her descendants eventually made their way to Czechoslovakia, and in 1948, one of them escaped the communists with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her name was Marta Merkel. She came to America. She changed her last name to sound more American. He looked at me. She became Marta Harrison, my grandmother. I sat back in my chair. The threads weren't just connecting anymore. They were weaving themselves into something I'd never seen before. David wasn't just carrying Johannes' trauma. He was carrying his blood, his actual biological blood. The merchant who died counting coins in Prague was his direct ancestor. My grandmother didn't just recognize something old in me, David said quietly. She recognized herself, her own history. The trauma that had been passed down through 14 generations, hidden in the DNA, waiting for someone to finally understand it. And she came back, I said, as his wife, to heal what she couldn't heal the first time, to forgive what she couldn't forgive. David wiped his eyes. In 1623, she cursed her husband as he lay dying. She blamed him for their destruction, and she spent 400 years carrying that guilt. She came back as my grandmother specifically to release him, to release us both. He folded the documents carefully and put them back in his pocket. I went to her grave last weekend, he said. First time in 35 years. I sat there for 3 hours. I told her everything about the regression, about Johannes, about finally understanding. His voice broke, and I forgave her. For the curse, for the anger, for all of it. And I asked her to forgive me. For holding on for so being tight. So afraid to live. What happened? He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. A butterfly landed on her headstone. In November, in Chicago, a monarch butterfly, orange and black, just sitting there looking at me. It stayed for almost a minute, and then it flew away. Some patterns don't just echo across lives. They replicate exactly, as if the soul is trying to tell us something, as if the numbers themselves are a message. And sometimes, when the message is finally received, when the pattern is finally understood, something shifts, something releases, and what was trapped for centuries finally gets to fly free. David Harrison walked out of my office that day, carrying 4 centuries less weight. The fear isn't gone entirely. It probably never will be. But now he understands it. Now he can meet it with awareness instead of paralysis. The coat he'd tried to buy, the one that triggered his heart attack, he bought it. Navy blue, just like he'd wanted. He wears it every winter now, and every time he puts it on, He thinks of a cold counting room in Prague, of gold coins scattered across a stone floor stained with blood. But he also thinks of his grandmother, of Marta, of a woman who crossed an ocean and for centuries to find her husband again. Not to punish him, not to remind him of his failures, but to show him that wealth isn't meant to be hoarded and feared and counted until the last breath. It's meant to be lived. 6 months after our final session, I received a letter from David. Inside was a photograph. He was standing in front of his brownstone, which had been completely renovated. New furniture visible through the windows. A brand new car in the driveway. And David himself, wearing that navy blue coat, smiling at the camera. The note attached was brief, Dr. Last night, I had the dream again. The gold coins, the counting room, the figure standing behind me, but this shimmy something was different. This time, when I reached the last coin, I didn't die. I stood up, I turned around, and the figure behind me wasn't Lord von Sternberg. It was my grandmother. She was smiling. She took the coin from my hand, threw it in the air, and said, "You don't need to count anymore. You're free." And then I woke up. Not in terror, not drenched. For the first time in 41 years, thank you for giving me my life back. David, I keep that letter in my desk. I read it sometimes when a case feels impossible. When someone sits across from me, trapped in a pattern they can't understand, carrying a weight that doesn't belong to this lifetime. It reminds me that we are more than our fears, more than our traumas, more than the mistakes we made and lives we can't remember. And it reminds me that love, real love, doesn't end when a life ends. It follows us, it finds us, it waits patiently across centuries if it has to, for the moment when we're finally ready to be healed. That's what I think about now. When I consider this case, I think about the ways trauma moves through generations, through lifetimes, how it takes up residence in our cells, our dreams, our irrational fears, how it shapes our choices without our knowing, how it makes us build prisons out of protection. And I think about love, about a woman who could have held onto her anger forever, who could have spent eternity repeating that curse. If only you had spent it, if only you had let us enjoy it. Instead, she came back. She found him. She showed him another way. Between what is fear and what is memory, there's always something that resists time. And sometimes, if we're lucky, what resists is love. I'm Dr. Adrian Marchetti. I've been conducting regression therapy for 26 years, and I still don't fully understand what I witness in these sessions. The patterns that repeat across centuries, the numbers that align too perfectly to be coincident. The souls that find each other, lifetime after lifetime, trying to heal wounds that were never meant to last this long. But I know this. There are patterns in our lives that don't make logical sense. Fears that have no rational origin. Relationships that feel fated. And behind every irrational fear, every inexplicable behavior, every pattern that repeats without explanation, there is a story. Sometimes that story is from childhood. Sometimes it's from a life we don't consciously remember. And sometimes the only way forward is to go back, to find the moment when the pattern began, to understand it, to grieve it, and finally, to release it. If David's story resonated with you, if you've ever felt afraid of something you couldn't explain, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you recognized, Tell me what weight you might be carrying that isn't yours. Because you're not alone. None of us are. We're all counting coins in the dark, in one way or another, trapped in patterns we didn't choose, carrying weights we don't remember picking up. The question is whether we have the courage to stop counting, to look up, to live. David found that courage after 47 years of fear, after 3 heart attacks, after losing his marriage to a pattern he couldn't name. He found it. And if he can, so can you. Subscribe to this channel, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the money in your account doesn't define you. The things you own don't define you. What defines you is how you live, how you love, how you choose to spend the time you have. Johannes died counting coins in 1623. David Harrison, 400 years later, finally learned to stop. That's the only inheritance that matters now. Not the gold, not the trauma, not the fear, not the freedom. Until next time,